Okay, there we go. Hopefully, you can hear me. If there's any problems, let me know. Um, I got 100 subscribers, which is about 200 more subscribers than I thought I would get. Um, so I've decided to make a few changes to the live stream. I'm going to start it a bit earlier. I'm hoping that will allow more people to participate. Also, I have decided I'm going to change the format of the way I was doing the the way I was doing the letter by letter. Um, it seems that there are people who are actually listening to this on a regular basis. And when I first made the format, I wasn't actually expecting anybody to actually pay attention to my videos on a regular basis and like learn anything. I thought people might look up verses which I had completed and that might in some way help them. Um, but since people are kind of, using the back library to learn and then moving forward, so I've decided to change the format a bit, hopefully for more advanced people or people who aren't as interested in learning the Hebrew itself. This will be a new format, and they'll like it. Okay, now we've been having. I constantly have discussions on the Paul Vanderklay Bridges of Meaning Discord server, which is a lot of fun. I highly recommend it. One of the things that I've noticed is uh, part of the discussions that we have, it really comes out of people having what I believe is an incomplete or incoherent view of Jewish history. And I wanted to give a credible history of Judaism, something that people who don't necessarily believe in the miracles of the Bible, who want something that very much goes together with um, with the academic history that we have, um, yet is still from a Jewish standpoint. This is not going to be an academic view of history, but it is going to be compatible with um, with what an academic historian might be willing to accept. But most importantly, I think it provides a narrative arc for people to understand the Jewish view and the Hebrew Bible, and possibly find a place for themselves in how they view that um, that arc. So, my sources are going to be from the Hebrew scriptures and Jewish traditions. This is mostly what I would say is compatible with Orthodox Judaism in belief. I'm not going to take the absolute Orthodox view. Obviously, I have my religious beliefs. This is an attempt to allow people to um, have beliefs which are compatible with a secular view of history. And obviously, I don't think the Bible is a history book. I think the Bible is teaching us lessons. Um, so this is more going to be on a secular and academic level. Okay, so where are we going to start? What pretty much I think everybody will agree is that there was a tabernacle at Shiloh. This was before the kingdom of David. and we have that the biblical narrative of when the tabernacle was there, there the period of Judges, and we have um, the things that that tabernacle was able to bring together. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole thing of whether there was a conquest or there wasn't a conquest. What there was this tabernacle where there was a priesthood, there were the Levites, there was a foundation story, there was a seat of judgment, a kind of capital for the people who started believing, who adopted the faith of that tabernacle at Shiloh, and a sacrificial cult, right? So this was, um, I mean, basically, I'm accepting the view that pretty much all religions started from animist origins. Obviously, I actually believe in the how the Bible describes things, but from a secular point of view, what I think everybody can agree on is that there was actually a tabernacle at Shiloh, which did provide this type of a religion. Of course, the word religion didn't really exist back then, but a type of religion at the time which was useful, which ended up spreading. Okay, so to explain what that religion was, what the ideas there was a foundation story. And that foundation story, I mean, the temple texts of Judaism, of Genesis, it had one creator, and we'll talk about what exactly that meant for the people who believed in it. But it was unique that these temples of the Tetragrammaton were were some would say henotheistic, but believed in one God who was the absolute creator of the world, and as we'll discuss later, both Arenic and Agentic. Um, Part of that foundation story, that creation myth, as some people would call it, was the idea that females were also involved, and Judaism was quite unique in the participation of females, uh, at least to some point. Obviously, the position of females within Jewish um, within the Jewish foundation story, Jewish narrative, the Hebrew narrative, was a bit different than a lot of the other things that were available, especially the Greeks and others. Um, there was this concept of 12 tribes, which had dominion over different parts of the land of Israel, right? At the time, religion was very much locality based, right? If you lived in a city, you went to the local temple, you worshiped the local deity, right? And so this tabernacle cult had this idea of there was a tribe of Levites, right? Who all of Israel was descended from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And it's notable to say that there were splinters, right? So there was the idea that the Ishmaelites were from Abraham, but they had a different mother, and that included the mother within the creation narrative, which in ways that really did not exist otherwise. And same thing, the mothers of um, of the Israelites. Um, Obviously, Esau had same mother and father, but there was this idea that the Levites were a kind of priesthood, and within the Levites there were the actual priests. There were the Kohanim, which was a hereditary position and continues to be hereditary in Judaism. Um, and the Levites spread out around the land, right? And each region had members of the tribes. And a really important difference here between the Hebrew religion, between Judaism and other religions which existed at the time, was the idea of conversion. When you look at the story of Abraham, there is a story of converting, of becoming a part of, right, the Jewish people and a part of Israel, which a lot of other places did not, a lot of other ideas and societies did not have. And there is, I mean, whether or not you believe the Jews were ever in Egypt, the foundation narrative did include this idea that we were slaves, right? And so throughout Jewish history, Jewish slavery, I did a whole video on it, was very different from other forms of slavery, chattel slavery, right? And there was this idea that once you freed someone who had been a slave, that person became part. They didn't just go home. They didn't just go back to wherever they came from. They became part of the Jewish people. And this is something that continued well into, even during the time of Maimonides, we have records that, any Jews who were manumitted, any slaves which were manumitted, became part of and accepted into the community. And there was this idea that we had all started as kind of slaves, and this idea of service, which was part of that foundation narrative. As far as monotheism, Judaism had a universal deity, right? There may be other, lower things, right? The divine council, angels, whatever it was, but God, right? The Tetragrammaton, Havaya, was over everything. Okay, and this so the Book of Job is actually one of the oldest texts we believe from the Bible. It has this idea of theodicy, right? The idea that our God controls everything. So why do bad things happen to good people, and good things happen to bad people? Why would God do this? And this becomes an integral part of Judaism, and it's a question you can only ask truly in a monotheistic framework. So there are various ways of explaining this: Arenic versus agentic. It's also called meta-divine versus divine, or transcendent versus personal God. So to really understand, think about it in Greek mythological terms. So there were the fates, there was Mother Nature, there was time, there was this meta-divine rules of the world, right? And then there were the agentic gods, there were the divines, there were the Zeus, the persons, right? That were acting within that arena, right? So what was the ultimate genius of Hebrew monotheism was crashing these two ideas together. The Arenic and the agentic gods were the same, right? The God who created the heaven and the earth, right, was the same God who spoke to Abraham, was the same God who spoke to Noah, who created the floods. It was one God who did everything and was responsible for everything. And that's what really allowed you for the first time to have a comprehensible world, right? Because the God here is the same God over there. If I go to Rome, still have the same God. If I go, so the rules of the world were universal. The rules that applied to humanity was universal. All humanity was created by our God, right? It wasn't just that Athena loves the Athenians and some other god loves, whoever, wherever you are. It was the God who created us created everyone, right? The God who created the world. And this is really, throughout the Hebrew texts, this it's a new way of looking at the world. And what Judaism offered was an arc of history. History had a beginning, history was going to have an end. This was revolutionary. And honestly, it's one of the things I think it, religious people really need to push back against the atheists on. The idea that the world had a beginning is not something that was universal, and in fact, it's not something that the scientists believe. So the word Big Bang, where does it come from? It was made to make fun of the Abrahamic religionists, mostly Catholic priests and scientists, who believed that the world did have a beginning based on the Bible. And into the 1930s, pretty much all scientists believed that that was just a ridiculous idea. Why would the world have a beginning? The world has always been, right? And then cosmology ended up showing that the world does actually have a beginning. There was the Big Bang, and now the atheists like to claim that science always believed this, but that this idea of an arc of history of having a beginning and an end, of having a narrative throughout, right? It was the God who took us out of Egypt, who continued to rule the world, which was very, very new and revolutionary, really. So the temple, and this was generally for most temples, it had a specific place where you could set a calendar, right? And you have to remember, nowadays we think of things in in calendars, right? We know what the date is, we know what the month is, uh, we know how the seasons change. Well, the 12-month cycle does not match, the lunar year does not match with the solar year, right? So the seasons don't strictly match with just having a 12-month calendar. And so in order to establish a calendar by which people could agree to do things, and there was the 7-year cycle. Whether or not there was the 50-year cycle was ever in place, we'll leave that for another time. But there was this idea of the 7-year cycle within Judaism, that on the 7th year you allowed your land to lay fallow. There was the tithing system, and there was a need for a calendar, and records. The temple kept the records, and what was very unique about the Jewish system was the alphabet. We'll talk about more about that, but there these were people you went to settle your disputes, right? So if two people, which included like making people swear and give testimony before the priests in order and get either an anointing of being some sort of leader, right? Within this culture, you had the judges, you had prophets, you had priests, you had Levites, you had different offices, and you eventually had kings, right? And that anointing um, came out of the cult that was based out of that tabernacle. Okay, and this a place to bring your sacrifices. Now there were, of course, other other religions in the area had similar systems. There were a few things as far as the expiation and community that was pretty much universal, right? The sacrifices were not just you come, you give, the animal or whatever it is, and it gets completely burnt up. That's not what would happen. What they would do is they would sacrifice the animal, they would burn some parts of it, and then there would be a communal meal, right? Which, as a community, you would come together. It would bring people together in a meal under God, and this is something you can look into the work of Jonathan Haidt more into how the role that religion played in unifying people. Um, what was I don't want to say unique, but special, not necessarily universal, was this idea of redemption. So there's this story of Abraham with his son Isaac, and instead of sacrificing his son Isaac, he sacrificed a lamb, right? Um, there's a similar idea with redeeming certain animals, um, and this this concept of redeeming something for something else was actually ended up being very important um, within Hebrew culture. As far as vows, we're going to talk about the logos. We're going to talk about the importance of the word within um, Hebrew culture, which didn't necessarily exist in other cultures. This idea that when you made a vow, when you used God's name, when you said something, you were bound by it, and you see this a lot. One of the most important things we have in Genesis, right? God gives Adam, no, thank you. Gives Adam the opportunity to name the animals, and that was their name. And actually, in the Hebrew Bible, you see this a lot, deriving meaning from the name of things, right? So this idea of logos and vows became really important as a distinguishing feature of Hebrew culture. And there was sexual purity, which was a lot of, and I mean, even if you go to certain places like India today, you will still see temple prostitution. That was a common thing. Um, and Hebrew culture did not allow that. There were no temple prostitutes. There was this idea of sexual purity. There was this idea of marriage. There was this idea of sex only being within marriage, which was quite unique and revolutionary. Um, so talking about specific parts of Hebrew culture which allowed it to really capture the world in ways that, look, when if you include Islam and Christianity, that's over half the world. That's some 4 billion people, maybe 5, who have been deeply affected by what started to be a very regional culture, and it's spread incredibly. One of the first things that spread was the alphabet, um, and I could go on about this at length, but the uh, the Hebrew alphabet, the Phoenician alphabet, it allowed people to read and write in ways that simply was not available with other forms of writing. That's why the alphabet has caught on, and that's why, in China, where they still use um, the they don't have an alphabet, they don't have an actual alphabet. They're still using pictograms. Um, what happened was that what happens is that a 9-year-old child starts knowing enough characters to be able to read. Compare that to when our children who learn an alphabet learn to read. The cognitive load of an alphabet was so much easier. And that really changed Jewish culture significantly. Um, Another thing, the concept of God as being. So um, Hebrew language does not have a present tense of the verb to be. And I actually think that might have something to do with how the idea of God and the ineffable name of God be, affected Hebrew culture. But God's name is very much involved in that, right? So when God speaks to Moses, he says, I will be what, or I am becoming what I am becoming, right? So this ehyeh asher ehyeh. And that is, the word to be was part and parcel of this God who was arenic and agentic, transcendent and personal, divine and metadivine. There was this idea of adoption, which, Abraham becomes part of the people of God, right? People becoming part of the people of God, right? And many cultures have this idea of possibly joining a family, and as part of that family, being part of the broader culture. But Hebrew culture had this idea of when you became a part of any of the families, you actually became a part of the nation. If you're interested in the difference between these ideas, look at the craziness around Jordan Peterson and his adoption into a Native American, I guess they call them First Nations up in Canada, particular family, and people trying to explain how that is different from becoming part of the tribe. Because we have this Western and really Judeo-Christian Jewish idea of being adopted into a nation, that there was that disconnect. And if you're really interested in that, you can look into the controversy there. And there's also this idea of someone becoming like a firstborn, right? There being a flip in lineages. The idea of Jacob, right? The younger brother becoming the inheritor, right? Catching on the heels of his older brother, right? This was very different from how a lot of cultures view um, the possibilities of the human being. The logos, we could talk about this forever. This is one of the most important ideas within Judaism, which spread very widely, was this idea of the importance of names, words, what you say, speech, right? The creation narrative of Judaism is God spoke and made the world, right? Um, Way too much to say here. One word about sexual purity and enforced monogamy. Judaism, Abrahamic religion, is the source of most of the heteronormativity around the world. The idea that every human being could and should get married, the idea of not castrating people, the idea of um, having, uh, you know, um, while it wasn't necessarily exactly one man, one woman, the creation stories are definitely very monogamistic in in the stories they tell. And you can see how it's pointing towards that and a different role for women. I think, I mean, again, this is something that can be spoken about at great length, but it's an important part of this Hebrew culture, which ended up taking over the world. Okay, so what actually happened? Um, we had this tabernacle. The culture of that tabernacle at Shiloh seems to have captured this whole area, and until there was a king, Saul, King David, who ended up building a temple in Jerusalem. That kingdom split into two. The 10 northern tribes, which was called Israel, they have been lost to history. Historically, we have no idea what's going to happen. I would say religiously, we have no idea what's going to happen. But there's all kinds of stories, including what's popular on the internet, that these 10 lost tribes ended up becoming the British peoples. Not a lot. I don't think there's any evidence for that, but there are quite a few people who do believe this. Um, and then there was the Babylonian captivity. When Babylon came and conquered the Israelites and took them into captivity, you have to realize that at the time, the way you created ethnocide, the way you got rid of people's religious affiliations and nationhood, the way you made them part, you conquered them, was you would take them from where they are, right? So if your god is in Athens and you take all the Athenians away from Athens, well, Athena is obviously not going to follow them around, right? So they go to a new place, they have to learn the new cult there. This was what the Babylonians expected. This is what generally happens to most people throughout history. This isn't what happened to the Jews because of the unique culture that they had. The Jews in exile exhibited very different characteristics. So the Babylonians set up the king of Israel within their court, and that became the exilarch. And he was supposed to become a vassal. He was supposed to become a part of Babylonian culture, and that did. And actually, the exilarch so ended up having continuity, I believe, for almost 1,000 years. Um, but what was different was that there were the scribes, the prophets, the people who maintained that no, even, the idea of Ezekiel in Babylon, seeing the God of the Jews, the God of Israel, over Babylon, over all of the world, that is absolutely earth shaking, right? That changed everything. And I keep on having to point this out. So the prophets, Hosea, Isaiah, talk about the important. They establish the synagogue service as a response to the destruction of the first temple. A lot of Christians have this idea that rabbinic Judaism, that the synagogue service came about after the destruction of the second temple in the year 70. all you have to do is remember that Jesus went to the synagogue, as did Paul, before the destruction of the temple in 70. Even in Jerusalem, there was a synagogue, because what happened was that while in captivity, right, while in Babylon, the exilarch, the scribes, the prophets, what became the rabbis, right, taught people to pray, taught, created this idea of a synagogue service, which which replaced that that temple, which no longer was there, in ways that was absolutely revolutionary. What also came to be is is the really ancient form of Zionism. The idea, we're going to go back to our land, right? And this became a major theme in the Bible, something that, you know, most people now, it's we understand that as a longing that threads throughout the Bible. It was not, obviously, people who were displaced similarly as the Israelites, maybe for a generation, maybe for two generations, had that idea, but this became sewn into the Jewish idea that our God is able to come and take us back to our land, take us back to our sovereignty. And that's how the second temple ended up actually being built. King Cyrus, um, we actually have we have a cylinder which talks about how he was convinced to allow people to go back to their lands. Well, that's what some of the Jews did. Uh, Ezra and Nehemiah, right? This concept came into Judaism of a redeeming Messiah, and Cyrus is actually called the Messiah. Um, and a small part of the Jews moved back to Israel, moved back to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. Most of the Jews did not. So you ended up having that fractured community where the exilarch, the academies in Babylon, actually, you know, they persisted for a very long time, arguably onto modern day. Um, and I mean, yeah, there. I I'm not going to go through all of Jewish history, but there did fracture the Jewish community between um, the Babylonian community and the what ended up becoming the Palestinian community, um, and that fracture uh, became really important during the Second Temple times. For one thing, most people did not believe that the Second Temple was a true reinstatement of the glory of the First Temple and an actual um, fulfillment of all the promises that the that the Bible and the narrative required. So people were still looking for a kind of restitution through a Messiah. Um, one important thing that happened during this time was the language changed from Hebrew to Aramaic. Okay, the what we know as the Hebrew alphabet is actually not the Hebrew alphabet. It is what's referred to in Hebrew as the Katav Ashurit, the Syrian alphabet. It's the Aramaic script, block script that we use today. That's not the original Hebrew alphabet, and there was a switch, right? Some communities in the Holy Land, including some of the Qumran people, insisted on, at least for some things, using the original Hebrew alphabet. Hebrew as a language retained its status as a liturgical language, but the language did change from Hebrew to Aramaic. They're similar languages, they're not the same language. Okay, so under Roman rule, there were a lot of messiahs. Um, the the Christian Bible records Theudas, Judas of Galilee. Um, People thought of John the Baptist as a Messiah. Obviously, Jesus. Um, there was Bar Kokhba afterwards. There were a lot of messiahs. There was a lot of hope that um, that Israel would become restored. And this really became a kind of insurgency, a civil war within the Roman Empire. The Romans did not know how to handle this. They had not had um, such a strong nationalistic fervor, which they were not able to put down in any of their other territories. And the Jews became a real problem for them, especially because Judaism spread so widely. The estimates are some 10% of the Roman population were Jewish. You have to realize paganism did not have a lot to commend it as opposed to Judaism. There were so when you look in the Christian Bible and you see the terms God-fearers, that's referring to Gentiles who believed in the God of Israel. They weren't converting to Judaism. They were going to synagogues. We believe up to 50% of the membership of some synagogues were not Jewish, with no intent of actually becoming Jewish. And the Judaizers were not actually Jews. They were the Gentiles who were either in the process of converting or believed that they should convert, right? Ultimately, this all came to a head at 70 when Jerusalem was destroyed. Jews were barred from living in Jerusalem. You know, you can go into that whole history. But as far as a coherent idea of history within Judaism, this is where the idea started and became what was ultimately codified within by Maimonides about 1,000 years later, is the idea that, you know what, the entire world needs to go through a type of renovation and becoming ready for the coming of the Messiah, in which ultimately that temple not built by hands, that third temple, that messianic king would be would actually come into being on earth. Okay, so two things which are included in the Jewish view of how this was supposed to become: the rise of Christianity. Christianity, arguably, and I would say, and more and more historians are starting to say, started off as a Jewish, within the Jewish community. What happened with Paul of Tarsus is that he took it to the Gentiles. He started evangelizing, which was not a Jewish thing. Yes, there were Gentiles coming into the synagogue, but as far as we know, and certainly what the Jewish view is, that Jews did not actually go out looking for converts the way that Pauline Christianity ended up doing. One of the ways in which it improved its purchase with other people was its antinomianism. Started getting rid of the parts of Judaism which were difficult for people, not participating in the sacrifices to idols, getting circumcised, keeping the Sabbath, all these things that were part of Judaism, which Christianity did not take with it. And what ultimately happened, is there was a fracture between the Jews and the Christians. So what exactly happened is not precisely clear. But what is believed is that the real fracture came at the blessing of the heretics, which was when the rabbis instituted in the prayer service a blessing. Blessing is a euphemism here. It was actually a curse upon the heretics. And what became a part of the Jewish synagogue service included in the main prayer in the Amidah a prayer that the heretics be destroyed. I think a lot of people misunderstand exactly what happened there. It is still the case in synagogues when an itinerant preacher, when a guest comes to the synagogue, if that person is viewed to be somebody who is learned, they are actually invited to lead the congregation. And leading the congregation in prayer, and actually Muslims do this as well, leading the congregation in prayer kind of shows that you know what you're saying, right? You know how to lead prayer, and which then allows you to give the homily, to give a drasha, to preach afterwards, right? So this is actually, it's become a Muslim thing. It certainly is still a Jewish thing. And what the blessing of the heretics did was that if somebody came and was invited to lead the prayers, well, it really does have a kind of neutralizing effect on that person, because if they did not say the blessing of the heretics, they would then be excluded, kicked out of the synagogue. And if they did say the blessing, once they came to say to give their drasha, if they identified themselves as a heretic, that was kind of humiliating in and of itself. Obviously, if somebody wants to come to synagogue, they beg off from leading the prayers, they can certainly do that, but then that person also will not be invited to preach, right? So I think the mechanism of the blessings of the heretics is misunderstood by a lot of people. And obviously, because of the importance of the logos, of words within Hebrew culture, some people decided not to come to the synagogue at all, because they felt that to be in the presence of that curse was actually undertaking a curse onto themselves. And this appears to be where Judaism and Christianity split off. The other thing that happened was there was the rise of Islam. If you look into the history of Islam, especially how Robert Eisenman, he's a historian and Dead Sea scholar, and a scholar of Islam, he believed, and I mean, it is obviously true that Muhammad was influenced by the Jews and Christians in that area. Who those Jews and Christians were exactly is not perfectly clear. Robert Eisenman believes that they were actually the Jewish Christians who had split off. The Ebionites disappear around the same time, if you want to look into that history of Christianity. And there appears to be a kind of reaction between Islam and Christianity, right? Where a strong rejection of the Trinity in favor of a pure monotheism, and a very different way of viewing, these two religions, Christianity and Islam, which, I mean, obviously Islam has grown to be as large as Christianity in a very short amount of time, 1,300 years, um, whereas Christianity has a more pacifistic message. Not that all Christians were pacifists, but there was this conquering monotheism. And what happened was that the Jews ended up being caught between these two large nations. Now, within Judaism, we believe that we will always be a small part of um, the nations. We will never be most numerous, like it says in the Bible. But what the rise of Islam as a counterbalance to Christianity did was allow Jews a particular place to exist between them and to thrive. I highly recommend looking into the concept of middlemen minorities. Um, it's described at length in the book Black Rednecks and White Liberals by Thomas Sowell. But this idea can also be captured by the history of the kingdom of Khazaria. Now, there's all kinds of various ideas about what actually happened and whether Jews are Khazarians and whatever. I'm not going to go into the craziness there. I'm actually going to talk about what actually did happen in Khazaria, which was Khazaria was actually a larger kingdom than I thought. That was situated between the Muslims and the Christians. And the story, which is pretty much corroborated by history, is that the king of Khazaria, having been a pagan country between the borders of Islam and Christianity, brings a Jew, a Muslim, and a Christian to, and this story is told in the book The Kuzari by Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. He to try to decide which religion he was going to go, and the king of Khazaria and possibly the nobility ended up converting to Judaism as kind of a compromise between Islam and Christianity, right? And this really did become kind of the middleman place of Jews between Muslims and Christians, right? That friction, which also did end up actually being pretty horrible at times to the Jews, but also in a way allowing Jews to succeed in ways that I think you should really look into what Thomas Sowell explains. And middlemen minorities are things that is a concept that is universal in all societies. Within both Christian and Muslim contexts, the Jews became the middlemen minorities. I'm going to speed forward to the Christian Reformation about 500 years ago. There was the Protestants and the Catholics, Enlightenment, secularity, which led to the emancipation of the Jews. Jews, because the Catholics and the Protestants had to come to a sort of secular détente with each other, right? This idea of secularity, this idea of people, regardless of their religion, being able to succeed, caught on. Judaism ended up fracturing again into many denominations, most notably Reform and Hasidic. Don't want to get into that too much, but a lot of Jews started feeling like they could be independent of Judaism as of the Jewish community, a part of the greater Christian community in Europe and in the Christian world. And it failed spectacularly. Especially, I mean, another thing, we could really get into, the Dreyfus affair in France was a case where somebody who was a very, very French and patriotic Jew was subjected to what pretty much everybody agrees was a lot of anti-Semitism. Theodor Herzl saw this. A lot of the Jews saw this. Jewish separatism became a thing. The new form of Zionism, which was actually secular, not religious, um, also caught on. There was religious Zionism as well. You know, going into the details of all this stuff would take forever. But especially after the Holocaust, there was a belief among most Jews that we needed to go back to a nation of our own. And although the secular Jews wanted to try even Uganda or different places, including parts of Russia, what did happen was that the religious and the secular ended up coming together in the modern state of Israel. I'm not going to get into all the things with Zionism. It would take forever. But what that has left us with is, one, the end of supersessionism. While only some Christians actually have started truly believing that God, especially dispensationalists, believing that God is going to keep his promises to the Jews and to Israel as such. Obviously, Catholics, most Eastern Orthodox, do not believe this. It has caught fire within the Christian imagination that the establishment of the modern state of Israel that is a fulfillment, and that the Jews are not a cursed people, which 100 years ago, that was pretty much the belief. The Jews had rejected Jesus. God had rejected the Jews. This was called supersessionism. A whole discussion there. There was a revival of the Hebrew language, and Jews coming together, a sort of homogenization that has happened over the past 50 years, certainly within Judaism. There's been the adoption of religion when you're living in a country where everyone, well, not everyone, but a majority of people are Jewish. Jewish religious practice has grown incredibly. And along with the revival of the Hebrew language, knowledge of Judaism, the number of Jews who have studied the entirety of the Talmud is so beyond anything that was possible before in history. It's mind-boggling. And what also started burgeoning was the Noahide movement, these are Gentiles who, again, like 2,000 years ago, are God-fearers. They're people who don't necessarily want to be Jewish, but they believe in the God of Israel, and they actually believe in Judaism. Their religion is Judaism. They do not want to take on being part of the nation of Israel. So much can be said about this. I have other videos on this, but what we see coming together now is what I would say Maimonides kind of prophesied 950 years ago. A Christianity and Islam having spread Jewish ideas all over the world, and a revival of Judaism, a restoration of Israel in a way that, from a Jewish standpoint, makes sense. One thing I will say about the Far East, Genesis 25:6. If you're wondering how is that going to take place, how are we going to find you know, uh, India, China, large numbers of people. I will remind you that actually Abraham had more than two sons. He had six sons with Keturah, Genesis 25:6. But unto the sons of the concubines which Abraham had, Abraham gave gifts and sent them away from Isaac his son. Yet while he yet lived, eastward unto the east country. And the Jewish mystics say that these gifts were certain spiritual gifts which allowed something to germinate in the Far East. So, as far as having a coherent narrative for the entirety of history, um, Islam, Christianity, and the gifts of Abraham does cover the entire world. And just a few very, very old um, prophecies, which I think these four verses say a lot. If you're looking at the God of Israel as the God of um, the Jews, as the God of history. Zechariah, I guess you call him, Zechariah 8:23. Thus said the Lord of hosts, in those days it shall come to pass that 10 men shall take hold out of all languages of the nations, even shall take hold of the skirt of him that is a Jew, saying, we will go with you, for we have heard that God is with you. Isaiah 56:7. Even them will I bring to my holy mountain, and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices shall be accepted upon mine altar, for mine house shall be called an house of prayer for all people. Deuteronomy 34, Deuteronomy 30, verse 4. If any of thine be driven out onto the outmost parts of heaven, from thence will the Lord thy God gather thee, and from thence will he fetch thee. And Zechariah again, chapter 14, verse 9. And the Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day shall there be one Lord, and his name one. If you want more, I went through all of this so quickly. People who really go in detail into a lot of these ideas, into Jewish history from a Jewish viewpoint. Rabbi Beryl Wine, he used to, his tapes used to be all over the place back when we had tapes. I think, if he had been on YouTube, it would have been amazing. There are some of his speeches on YouTube. His books are through ArtScroll, his history books. They are absolutely inspiring. I highly recommend them. Professor Henry Abramson has a YouTube channel. He does absolutely wonderful histories. Highly recommend his lectures. Brilliant man. Writes a lot of very interesting. Gives a lot of interesting lectures. Very minute detail into Jewish history. Rabbi Joseph Telushkin and Dennis Prager actually wrote several books together. They both have. Dennis Prager has a more secular view. Rabbi Telushkin is obviously more Orthodox religious. But any of their books, their writings, can help you better understand Judaism and Jewish history from a Jewish point of view. Okay, now, if there are no questions, feel free, if you have questions about the history and this arc of history, feel free either to ask in the comments or on the Discord. I will be going on to Oh, before I forget. So, um, there is a timeline of history available through the Jewish Virtual Library. Eh, I'm not a huge fan, but if you want more detail, more exact dates, more concepts, it's a place to start. There's lots of places you can get more of that. As Otherwise, I am, if there are no questions, I am going to move on to Psalm 136. And the new format, I decided what I'm going to do is actually read the translations first so that when we get into the Hebrew, we can really drill down into where the translations might disagree. Hopefully, this will go faster. And I'm not going to do as much of a letter by letter approach. I'm not going to describe Amar and Diber, these things which I'm going to try to only concentrate on things which stand out. Okay? Hopefully, people like this format. If you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments. Please remember to like and subscribe and share. I am absolutely delighted that anybody is paying attention to this stuff. Um, it's really, I mean, eh, I, I, I can't tell you how glad I am that people are finding this worthwhile. Um, and if there's anything I can do, please let me know. Okay, so Psalm 136. Now, this is known as Hallel Hagadol, the Great Hallel, and it is actually recited on Passover. This may be the psalm that was recited at the Last Supper. In case you're trying to think about it, and because of its repetitive nature, I thought it would be a good trial for this new format. So we'll start with King James. O God, thanks unto the Lord. Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endureth forever. NIV, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, his love endures forever. And they put this in italics because this is a responsive reading in synagogue often. Let's look at how Chabad translates it. Give thanks to the Lord because he is good, for his kindness is eternal. Yeah. Let's look at the Hebrew. Hodu lahavaya ki tov ki laolam chasto. One of the most common verses in Jewish liturgy. Now, the word hodu here, it isn't a hefil. I looked in because, I mean, this gets used so much. I looked into what the concordance has to say about the word. The root is apparently from to cast in Arabic and other Semitic languages. It's not really used that way within Judaism. So the word Yehuda, right, Judah, which is where Judaism and the word Jew comes from, right, is used in three ways within Judaism. It's used as a mark of confession, a mark of giving thanks, and a mark of joy. Okay, and these concepts are very related theologically. I'm not going to get into all of that, but this is the hefil. It's the causative form, which ultimately is how it's mostly used within Judaism. So sometimes I see this as give unto, but give thanks, confess, be joyous in are all ways you can translate this. It is an imperative, masculine plural, right? It's in the command form. To God, ki tov, ki le'olam chasto. And le'olam literally means to the world, but it means eternal, right? Forever. Chasdo, his chesed, and this is a key word within Judaism, which honestly I would probably leave untranslated myself. It's oftentimes translated as a loving kindness, and you saw there, mercy or love, and you know, Chabad that does kindness. How exactly you want to do that is up to you. Okay, next verse. It's actually, I forgot. We're sticking. King James. Oh, give thanks unto the God of gods, for his mercy endureth forever. NIV. Give thanks to the God of gods, his love endures forever. So, same responsive end every single time. Chabad, give thanks to the God of the angels, for his kindness is eternal. Anybody paying attention to Michael Heiser and the whole idea of the word Elohim, and you'll notice that I didn't say Elohim because this word here obviously is not referring to God himself, right? So that's a whole other discussion. If you're interested, we can get into that. But Hodu le'elokei Elohim ki le'olam chasto. What exactly Elohim here means? Either gods, lesser gods, angels, judges, powers, right? It's in the construct, right? The first one is obviously referring to God. It's in the construct form with Elohim, right? So it's Elokei ha-Elohim. The first one is the divine use of the word name, the name of God. The second one is a profane one. What exactly? Obviously, Chabad did angels there. Ki le'olam chasto, right? Like we had before. Next verse. King James. Oh, give thanks to the Lord of Lords, for his mercy endureth forever. And they capitalized the first Lord and not the second one. And NIV, very, very similar. Give thanks to the Lord of Lords, his love endures forever. Chabad. Give thanks to the Lord of Lords, and again, they did the same thing, for his kindness is eternal. Let's look at the Hebrew. Hodu la'adonai ha'adonim ki le'olam chasto. Now, if you are keeping track, in Judaism, when we come upon the Tetragrammaton, since we do not ever pronounce it, we usually use the Shem Adonot, right? Which is the plural first person possessive, right? My lords, right? But it's used as the singular. That's called the Shem Adonot, right? But here it's the Lord of Lords, and it's not actually using the Tetragrammaton as you usually expect when a capital Lord is used. This is actually the name itself, Aleph Daled Nun Yod. For his love endures forever. Next verse. I forgot to click. Verse 4. To him who alone doeth great wonders, for his mercy endureth forever. NIV. To him who alone does great wonders. His love endures forever. Chabad. To him who performs great wonders alone, for his kindness is eternal. And there's only one Rashi here. He's explaining the word alone. In the beginning, no angel was created when he made the wonders, the heaven, the earth, the sun, and the moon. Right? So that's Rashi's interpretation there. לעושה נפלאות גדולות לבדו כי לעולם חסדו. I kind of expected if you're doing the milui chaser thing, the full or gedolot here is I kind of expected there it to be written with complete milui with two vavs. It's only written with one vav. Oseh is the word to do or to make, right? Ein sin he. Niflaot, a pele is a wonder, right? So niflaot, wonders, yeah, in the things which make you. So it's in the nifal. It's in the not active, passive voice. Pele is a wonder. Nifla is something which is wondrous. Okay. Levado, and that's how it's saying alone, right? Levad, meaning by itself, right? By himself. Levado. And it has the suffix third person masculine singular there. Okay. Not a lot to say there. Verse 5. To him that by wisdom made the heavens, for his mercy endureth forever. NIV, who by his understanding made the heavens, his love endures forever. So wisdom or understanding, right? In Hebrew, there are specific roots, and we tend to be very careful with them. Chabad, to him who made the heavens with understanding, for his kindness is eternal. The word understanding here is tvuna, right, which comes from bina. The word maven, you may have heard. So le'oseh hashamayim, so this is again the to make, right, ein sin he. And it is alliterating with the previous ones. Obviously, this is very poetic. It's a recitation. But Hashamayim bituvuna. So tvuna is a form of bina, right? The root is bet nun he, which is also the root for so the root here is probably yud bet nun, to understand. They're saying no, from bet vav nun. That's the root they're giving it. No, bet yud nun. Okay, ben. To understand, and in Judaism we say that this is the one that gives form, that gestates, right? Understanding one thing from another. So I would definitely not use the word wisdom there, like the King James did. But bitvuna, right? And I mean, this is a pretty rare form of the verb. Let's see how of the word. Let's see how many times it shows up in the Bible. More than I expected. It shows up a total of 42 times. So you can look further into that if you like. Next verse. Please, if you have any questions, you want to get into things any further, do let me know, and we will stop and go into things with more precision. To him that stretched out the earth above the waters, for his mercy endureth forever. NIV, who spread out the earth upon the waters, his love endures forever. And Chabad, to him who spread out the earth over the water, for his kindness is eternal. Very similar translations. The Hebrew is le'oseh hashamayim. Oh, sorry, I forgot to click. Leroka haaretz al hamayim ki la'olam chasdo. Now the word roka here, you may remember from the word rakia, which means firmament from Genesis 1, right? So it's going back to there, and it's written bechisaron, which is normal. This is the participle. It's actually in the present tense. It's not in the perfect or imperfect. But the participle is often used as somebody who does something, right? So a shomer is a guard, right? Because the participle is used to describe the noun. Haaretz, that's way we say land. One of the ways we say land. Al hamayim. This is the preposition with the ayin, not aleph, and water. Yeah, seems pretty simple there. Verse 7, to him that made great lights, for his mercy endureth forever. NIV, who made the great lights, his love endures forever. God, to him who made great luminaries, for his kindness is eternal. So let's see what the Hebrew, Me'orot HaGedolot, I'm guessing, Orot HaGedolot. So Le'oser Orim Gedolim. Actually, I thought it would be Me'orot because that's what's in Genesis 1. This is a slightly different way of saying it than it was in Genesis 1. And Gedolim, I expected a vav there. It's the chisaron vav if you're paying attention to that. But otherwise, pretty simple. Or means light. Next verse 8. The sun to rule by day, for his mercy endureth forever. NIV, the sun to govern the day, his love endures forever. Chabad, the sun to rule by day, for his kindness is eternal. We have a question in regards to Rashi's commentary of no angels being before creation. Is it possible there could be a different interpretation? Thinking of Job 38, 4-7 off the top of my head. Just a thought. What exactly it means levado, personally, since all of the creations are actually in the singular, right? There is that part where God says in Genesis 1, let us make man, right? And people go forever until thing. But this is saying that creation was done by God himself, levado. You might want to look at, I don't remember Job 38, 4-7 off the top of my head, but you might want to look in the concordance for other places where the word levad is used. That might be an idea. But I would say, I think the distinction that Rashi's making is based on the fact that God does, when creating man, say, let us, right? And there he says in Genesis that God consulted with the divine council. And, we could do a whole thing on the divine council. But, yeah. So let's look at the Hebrew. Et hashemesh lamamshelet bayom ki laolam chasto. So this is the first time we have the direct object marker here, and no verb. Hashemesh lamamshelet. So memshelet is mashal mem shin lamed is a particular thing. You might want to use your concordance there. What memshalah exactly means. In modern Hebrew, it actually means government. But a mashal is also a proverb or analogy. So you can look in your concordance there. I will say the bayom does have the article in the vocalization there if you're paying attention. Let's keep on going. Verse 9. The moon and stars to rule by night, for his mercy endureth forever. The moon and stars to govern the night, his love endures forever. Chabad. The moon and stars to rule at the night, for his kindness is eternal. And the Hebrew, et hayareach, and yareach is there. Well, sometimes I mean a chodesh is a month, and it refers to the moon. Though this word for moon is yareach. I mean, yeah, you can look in your concordance there. Kochavim is written b'milui vav here, if you're paying attention, and it is in the plural. Lememshelot balayla. That's a little bit surprising. It is b'milui vav, and it's a different form of um, of rulership. I mean, it is in the plural, feminine plural. I mean, both these verbs, both yareach and kochavim, are actually masculine. Yeah, that is curious there. And Balayla, again, the vocalization is putting the article there in the night. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised at the memshalot there. Let's keep on going. Verse 10. To him that smote Egypt in their firstborn, for his mercy endureth forever. To him who struck down the firstborn of Egypt, his love endures forever. They're not being very literal there in the NIV. Chabad, to him who smote the Egyptians with their firstborn, for his kindness is eternal. And Rashi again, because it says v'chorehem, he says it does not say their firstborn, but with their firstborn, right? So there's that prepositional bet there. The firstborn arose and beat their father's legs because they detained Israel when they heard about the 10th plague from Moses. And I'm guessing he gets that from a midrash, but I'm not sure. So lemakeh, so this is lahakot, to strike, to beat, right? And it's in the hefil participle, right? This is in the present tense, remarkably so. It makes sense because, especially when we do the Seder, we say that it is a present thing that we are experiencing. And in the Hebrew, remember, this is specifically said during Passover. It's very much in the present tense. Mitzrayim bivro bechorehem. Again, there's that prepositional bet there. Bechor is written b'milui vav. So with their firstborn, in their firstborn, kilo lam chasdo. Next verse. And brought out Israel from among them, for his mercy endureth forever. NIV. To him who and brought Israel out from among them, his love endures forever. Chabad. And he took Israel from their midst, for his kindness is eternal. Let's see what the Hebrew says. Vayotze, again, it's in the so, okay, this is in the consecutive imperfect, they're saying. Because it's in the imperfect and it starts with a vav, they're saying it's being flipped in context. Okay. Um, Lahotzi, right, to bring out, is the hefil of Yetzia. I think the root is Yud Tzadik Aleph. Yeah, Yud Tzadik Aleph. And Yetziat Mitzrayim, right? It's written Bemilui Vav there. Mitocham is also Bemilui Vav there. Not very strange. The word Toch is midst. You can use your concordance there, but from amongst them. Yeah. Next verse. Verse 12. With a strong hand and with a stretched out arm, for his mercy endureth forever. NIV. With a mighty hand and outstretched arm, his love endures forever. Chabad. With a strong hand and with an outstretched arm, for his kindness is eternal. Let's see what the actual Hebrew is. Beyad chazaka uvzrua netuya ki leolam chasto. So yad is literally hand, right? Zroa is an arm, right? And Zora is written bemilui vav here, which I'm a little surprised at. Chazak means to grab onto or strong, right? And because yad is feminine, it's chazaka, right, in the feminine, and zroa is in netuya. So lahatot. Actually, there are places where it says God noteh hashamayim, right? God stretches out the heavens, right? It's one of the ways netiya is used. It's in the passive participle. Yeah, and yeah. Um, you might want to use your concordance there. It is in the present tense. Like I said, this psalm is strangely in the present tense, although not strangely. To him which divided the Red Sea into parts, for his mercy endureth forever. NIV. To him who divided the Red Sea, and they have a note there, asunder, his love endures forever. Let's see what their note says. Or the Sea of Reeds, also in verse 15. So Yam Suf literally means the Sea of Reeds. How that exactly Red Sea and Reed Sea got confused is weird. I thought that it might have actually to do with the fact that they're so close, but apparently in the German, the words are completely different, and that's where the confusion started. So it is what it is. Chabad. To him who cut the Sea of Reeds asunder, for his kindness is eternal. And Rashi brings what is the traditional Jewish view, because not Cecil B. DeMille's movie, The Ten Commandments, where it's split straight, and there's one way. Since it says Gezarim, the Jewish interpretation traditionally has been that there was 12 paths, one for each tribe. Let's look at the Hebrew. Legozer Yam Suf Legazarim Ki Leolam Chasto. So it's using that same root, Gezer, right? Gimel Zain Resh. A Gezerah can also be an edict, right? So yeah. So he was Gozer. He divided it into pieces, Gezarim. They're saying two. I'm not sure I would say two, but I can see how you could say that. Yam Suf is a word, and Suf is a reed in Hebrew. Yeah. And I kind of would have. whether gozer, I mean, first of all, gozer is in the present tense. And second, it's bechisaron vav, which is not very strange. Let's keep on going. Verse 14. And made Israel to pass through the midst of it, for his mercy endureth forever. And brought Israel through the midst of it, his love endures forever. And caused Israel to cross in its midst, for his kindness is eternal. Let's see what the Hebrew is. Vehevir. So again, we have the conjunctive vav, and so the root is ayin bet resh, which is Hebrew, right? The same root to cross over of the word Hebrew, ivri, right? And it's in the hefil, it's in the causative. Israel betocho, right? Toch, just like we had before, written b'milui vav, ki la'olam chasdo, right? So he made Israel pass. I'm kind of surprised at Hevir, because Hevir is kind of over, I guess, ever across. Yeah. It is what it is. Let's see here. Where were we? Verse 15. But overthrew Pharaoh and his host in the Red Sea, for his mercy endureth forever. NIV, verse 15. But swept Pharaoh and his army into the Red Sea. His love endures forever. So they decided that, and generally, I'm not even sure I would translate the and, personally. And he threw Pharaoh and his host into the sea of reeds, for his kindness is eternal. Verse 15. Veni'er paro vechelo beyam suf ki la'olam chasdo. So ni'er is actually a strange root. Nun ayin resh shows up 11 times in the Bible. To shake off, out, self, overthrow, toss up, and down. Oh, hitna'ari ma'afar. Right. To shake. Yeah. Na'ar also means a young man. Right. So veni'er. So there's the conjunctive of. It's in the perfect, and so they're saying conjunctive perfect, meaning that it kept the perfect sense, I believe. Yeah. No, that should be consecutive. I'm not sure why they did that. That seems like it's the consecutive perfect to me. But overthrew, yeah. Paro is obviously Pharaoh. I believe almost always written without a vav. Vechelo, so chayil, obviously a chayil can be an army, and that is what it seems to mean here. But it can also mean riches, right? So chayil can also be riches, strength, I guess. Beit Yam, and this actually, the vocalization does not have an article here. So without an article, Yam Suf, right? The Sea of Reeds. In English, you would obviously put the there. I guess in Hebrew you really wouldn't. By Yam Suf. Yeah, you're right, because that wouldn't make sense. If if you were going to put a article there, you would put it on Suf. Right. I mean, the translation is mostly pretty simple here. Okay. To him which led his people through the wilderness, for his mercy endureth forever. NIV, to him who led his people through the wilderness, his love endures forever. Chabad. To him who led his people in the desert, for his kindness is eternal. Let's see what the Hebrew is. Lemolich amo bamidbar ki laolam chasto. So this is from the word halach, right? To go. It's not very common to see it in the hefil in the causative form, and it is in the participle. It's in the present tense. So kind of strange, and it's written in complete milui. I wasn't expecting that above necessarily, but because of the hey, yeah. So, right, it's a hey lamed chaf in the hefil. Amo, his people. This the word people here is Ba midbar, in the wilderness. There is that article there, and midbar is so midbar Sinai is how we refer to the wilderness or the desert of Sinai. Yeah, however you want to translate midbar there, I would just keep on. And Bamidbar is actually the name of the book in the Pentateuch, which I believe gets translated as Exodus. Now I forget which is it, if it's Exodus or Numbers. I always get the names confused there. Sorry. But Bamidbar is the name there. Okay. Next, verse 17. To him which smote great kings, for his mercy endureth forever. To him who struck down great kings, his love endures forever. To him who smote great kings, for his kindness is eternal. Rashi says. Here he alluded to the 31 kings, and he compared for them Pharaoh and his host, and the plagues of Egypt to mighty kings harsher than they. Sichon was equal to all of them, and Og equal to all of them. That's from the Mahzor Vitri. Each one individually, and so did he explain above 135:11. Sichon, the Melech HaAmori, right? And so it is in the Agadah. He's explaining from the Agadah, which is the stories. Let's see what the actual Hebrew is. Lemakeh melachim gedolim ki laolam chasto. There is a bit of alliteration here. Makeh, again, it is in the participle. It's in the present tense, and this is strike like hakot we had before. Melachim, kings, right? Gedolim, without above. Pretty normal. Great. Let's keep on going. And slew famous kings, for his mercy endureth forever. NIV. And killed mighty kings, his love endures forever. Chabad. And slew mighty kings, for his kindness is eternal. Let's see what the actual Hebrew is. Veyaharog, right? Hereg means I think that is, it's not tirtzach, right? So do not murder in the 10 Commandments is retzach, resh tzadik het. This is a different root, hereg, and I believe it's used when people are put to death in the Bible. There's no vav there. This is in the imperfect with a conjunctive vav, so it's getting flipped. I must have had consecutive and conjunctive confused. Sorry. So they use consecutive when they're saying that it's getting flipped, and they use conjunctive when they're saying it's not getting flipped. Melachim, same word for kings. Adirim, adir is not that common of a root. From Adar, which is the name of the month. It's used quite a few times, actually. 27 times in the Bible. So if you want to look those up, excellent, famous, gallant, glorious, goodly, lordly. Yeah. Adir, it actually shows up a lot in Hebrew poetry just because it starts with an aleph, and there is that Hebrew acrostics, right? So yeah, so that happens a lot. Ki la'olam chasto. Let's keep on going. Verse 19. Sichon, king of the Amorites, for his mercy endureth forever. Sichon, king of the Amorites, his love endures forever. Yeah. Sichon, the king of the Amorites, for his kindness is eternal. Right. All of them translating the same. LeSichon melech ha'emori ki la'olam chasto. Very exactly what you expect. Nothing controversial here. If you're paying attention, Sichon, I believe, is always completely milui like it is here, and Emori is without a vav, spelled without a vav. Okay, verse 20. And Og, the king of Bashan, for his mercy endureth forever. And Og, king of Bashan, his love endures forever. Yep. Chabad. And Og, the king of Bashan, for his kindness is eternal. Ul Og melech habashan ki laolam chasto. Now, by Sichon it says melech ha'emori, the Amorite king, and here it says Og was the king of Bashan. If you're paying attention to that, Og is written with a vav there. Yeah, nothing too surprising. Verse 21, and gave their land for an heritage, for his mercy endureth forever. Verse 21, and gave their land as an inheritance, his love endures forever. And he gave their land as an inheritance, for his kindness is eternal. Yeah. Venatan artsam len-nachala ki le'olam chasto. So this is to give or to set. Natan, right? Very common verb. Artsam, their land. It's in the singular, so it's not their lands. So third person masculine plural, their lands. Okay. Le-nachala, as an Nahal, right? Nun het lamed is lahanchil, right? To leave an inheritance as a heritage. And it says Yaakov chavel nachalato, right? That Jacob is the cord of his inheritance, referring to God. Pretty simple stuff, not very strange. Verse 22, even an heritage unto Israel his servant, for his mercy endureth forever. 22, an inheritance to his servant Israel, his love endures forever. Chabad. Um, an inheritance to Israel, his servant, key for his kindness is eternal. Verse 22. Nachala leIsrael avdo ki leolam chasdo. Again, the same heritage, nachala, to Israel, right? And Eved literally is actually slave, but it's usually translated as servant because of the whole slave thing we keep going to many, many times. But the root there is Ein Bet Dalet, to which includes worship. Okay. Verse 23, who remembers us in our low state, for his mercy endureth forever. NIV, he remembers us in our low estate, his love endures forever. Chabad. Who remembers us in our humble state, for his kindness is eternal. And Rashi says that is referring to Egypt. Let's see. Shebeshiflenu zachar lanu ki leolam chasdo. So shefel means low, right? Literally low, right? So in our lowness, shefel ruach can also mean kind of depressed, right? Being depressed. So that it's a prepositional shin, prepositional bet, shefel, right? Shiflenu, our shefel, our lowliness. Zachar is the root to remember, and this is in the perfect. Lanu, us, right? First person collective, common plural. Yeah. Let's keep on going. Verse 24. And hath redeemed us from our enemies, for his mercy endureth forever, and freed us from our enemies, his love endures forever. Very different ways of putting it. He rescued us from our adversaries, for his kindness is eternal. And Rashi says, from their midst, and performed all these wonders for us. Okay. See what the Hebrew says. Ve'yifrekenu mitzarenu ki leolam chasdo. So this is actually an interesting word. The root is peresh kuf, which means to. So, for example, a chapter is called a parak, right? It means a piece. So he disjointed, right? And actually, a parak can also be a joint, right? So he tore apart. Purkan is used as a form of rescue, but there is a division here, right? Mitzarenu. So the word tsar. So this is alliterating with Mitzrayim, right? Tsarenu. Literally, a tsar is somebody who besieges you, right? Sorer, to bind, to right, a narrow, a narrowing there, right? Mitzarenu, ki leolam chasdo. Yeah. Let's keep on going. Verse 25. Who giveth food to all flesh, for his mercy endureth forever. NIV. He gives food to every creature. His love endures forever. Chabad. Who gives bread to all flesh, for his kindness is eternal. Chabad says he alludes here to kindness to all creatures. Let's see why they said that. Noten lechem lechol basar ki leolam chasdo. So noten is to give. Again, this is very much in the present tense, right? Lechem literally means bread, right? Like Bethlehem, right? The house of bread. Lechol basar, to all flesh. Um, and Rashi is saying that that's uh, actually talking about the animals. Although, I mean, basar can also refer to human beings. Ki olam chasto, for, yeah, that one we translate a lot. Last verse, oh, give thanks unto the God of heaven, for his mercy endureth forever. Um, verse 26, give thanks to the God of heaven, his love endures forever. Chabad. Give thanks to the God of heaven, for his kindness is eternal. Rashi, who prepares therein food for every creature. The expression for his kindness is eternal appears 26 times in this psalm, corresponding to the 26 generations that the world was without Torah and existed through the kindness of the Holy One, blessed be he. Now, if you are keeping up with the Jews, um, the the number 26 is also the numeric, the gematria of the Shem Havaya, of the Tetragrammaton. So that's of note. Let's actually read the Hebrew here. Hodu lekel hashamayim ki la'olam chasto. So again, we are going back to the Hodu, right? So like we had at the first verse. And the word here for God is actually the shortest name of God we have. It's just Kel, right? Which in many places just refers to the mighty. And even human beings are sometimes called El. Right, like the name Samuel, right? But obviously here it's talking about God because it's in a construct form with Hashamayim, with the heavens. Yep, that is verse Psalm 136. If you have any questions, I would love to entertain them. I would also love any comments anybody has about the new format. If you prefer we go back to the old format, if you have any suggestions for a different format. Also, if you have any suggestions in general, I moved the live stream an hour forward. I'm hoping this is more convenient for people. Let me know. We actually had we had quite a few people on today, which is great. I can even move it even an hour more. I should be able to do 6 Pacific if that's more comfortable for people. Do let me know. And seeing no questions, I am going to check on the Discord server. There are nobody said anything on the Discord server yet. And seeing no comments on in the live chat, I am going to end as I usually do with Zephaniah 3:9. If it will load. Why hasn't it loaded? Okay, there we go. Zephaniah 3:9. For some reason, it's being very, very slow. I'm hoping closing Windows will make it easier for it to render. There we go. Okay. Ki az ehepoch el amim safa berra. Doing this from memory because it's being so slow. Likro Hulam B'Shem Havaya L'Ovdo. There we go. Safa Berra Likro Hulam B'Shem Havaya L'Ovdo Shchem Echad. And thus I will restore or turn over, and the word hefech there, I would definitely look up in your concordance. It's a very interesting word. El Amim, to the people, as Safa, Safa is literally lip, Berra, winnowed or pure, Likro Hulam, so that they may all call B'Shem Havaya, in the name of the Tetragrammaton, Le'ovdo, to serve him, and that is the same root as we just had, where we said Israel Ovdo, right? Israel, his servant. Shchem Echad, with one shoulder.